The files of Epstein, which were published in these days in the amount of 3.5 million materials, clearly demonstrate that now we know how the Western elite treats children, including their own children. Yes, in general they probably don't care anymore. What do they do with them, you see for yourself. What do you want from those who for years and decades have subjected children to violence, perverted them, and literally did it in a stream, including all new and new, both victims of this perversion in the form of minors and adults, motivating them to make appropriate progress in their political career? They are behind the Kiev regime. They give the Kiev regime colossal funds for the murder of children of the civilian population, including legalization in Ukraine, as it was done in 2022 by Zelensky, as well as black transportation by simplifying the procedure for the removal of people's organs, even without their consent. A hellish conglomerate. But look, on February 3rd, NATO Secretary General Rutte made a statement in Kiev. He made another aggressive statement that after the peace agreement is reached in Ukraine, some troops, weapons, aviation, and naval forces from the so-called coalition of those who wish will appear on the territory of this once prosperous country or region. All this, of course, is an undisguised plan to carry out foreign military intervention. This is how it should be called. For us, this is categorically unacceptable. Russia has repeatedly stated that the deployment of troops from Western countries on the territory of Ukraine, under any flag, will pose a threat to our security. These troops will be considered by us as a legal military target. In the midst of the energy crisis provoked by the Zelensky regime, there is a particularly cynical message about the schemes of the Ukrainian authorities. Well, the authorities themselves, with the means and equipment intended to provide people with light, heat, and water. This is a picture of overshadowing corruption in the sphere of energy in Ukraine. There is news about the emergence of the so-called OLX marketplace in the largest Ukrainian market. Earlier, it was given to Poland from the government reserve as a gift to the Kiev regime of generators, at prices lower than factory prices. This illustrates the true attitude of the bank to people, in fact, because of this very bank, who found themselves on the verge of a humanitarian catastrophe. For the Zelensky regime, it is more important to fill their pockets, and they simply do not care about the desire of a simple person. The painful historical lessons in modern Ukraine are doomed to oblivion. The Zelensky regime and its militants have long surpassed their ideological idols from the Third Reich in cruelty and hatred of people. It is indicative that today's Bandera people are exterminating civilians on the same territories, on the same lands that once were under the oppression of the brown plague of Hitler's occupants, who were heroically liberated by those whose descendants today live within the former Ukrainian SSR. The so-called Euro integration in Moldova has actually led to the collapse of the state-owned enterprise system. According to the Register of Public Property of Moldova, by the beginning of 2025, no more than 45% of state-owned enterprises were active, and about 25% were not profitable. The rest no longer worked, or were in the process of liquidation. Such are the modern realities of once prosperous Moldova. It is obvious that the real weapon, if it is soon sought in Chisinau, which is intended to destroy the sovereignty and national identity of Moldova, is the Russophobia imposed by the European Union in the Republic, and the anti-Russian orientation of the anti-Russian Russophobic course of official Chisinau. The claims of the U.S. President to the right to indicate to independent states who to trade with are not new. The position of India, which has repeatedly spoken with the leadership of this country, leaders of India and in contact with Russian colleagues, is also well known. It is in matters of foreign economic cooperation that New Delhi leads exclusively by national interests, making a sovereign decision based on economic purpose. We have no reason to believe that Indian friends have revised their approach. We are still convinced that the purchase of Russian hydrocarbons from India is beneficial to both countries and helps to maintain stability in the international energy market. We are ready to continue close cooperation in this area with our partners in India. At one time, Russia offered to export Iranian-enriched uranium products to its territory. This initiative is still on the table. In fact, this was said by the President's administration recently. However, it is important to take into account that the mentioned reserves belong to Iran. Their presence does not contradict the obligations of Tehran under the Non-Distribution of Nuclear Weapons Treaty. Only Iranians have the right to dispose of them, including to decide whether to export them outside Iran, and in the event of a positive decision, where to export them or not. Our position on this subject is well known. It is known to all interested parties. It has not undergone any changes. It has always been so. We remain committed to the search for solutions exclusively in the political diplomatic framework. In particular, we hope that, as planned for Friday, February 6th, the meeting of high-ranking representatives of Iran and the United States in Istanbul will take steps to get out of the current situation, which will help to avoid further escalation. We are convinced that the pressure on Iran will not only not contribute to regulation, but will also lead to increased tensions in the Middle East. We hope that this will be avoided. The pressure on Cuba is being used by Washington on a permanent basis for decades. It is aimed at its economic stifling. No one is hiding this. Russia's position on this matter remains unchanged and is categorically unacceptable. Unilateral measures of sanctioning the sovereign and independent states that are used by the UN and the UN Charter, as well as other international law norms, are decisively condemning the illegitimate and prohibitive steps taken against Havana. The pressure on the Cuban leadership and the citizens of this country are convinced that despite the possible external obstacles on the way to their development, Cuba will continue to maintain effective external economic ties. We cannot accept attempts to create obstacles to international cooperation, especially with a country in a difficult socio-economic situation, largely caused by the American trade, economic and financial blockade. We firmly intend to consistently develop our multilateral cooperation for the benefit of the peoples of our states, strengthening international security and stability. In the case of Finland, such a constructive attitude is clearly not being followed today. As you can imagine, it is unlikely that any progress can be made without, as I said at the beginning, fundamental changes in the Russophobic foreign policy course and the international priorities of the Finnish authorities. Our country will respond to all possible risks and threats coming from Estonia. So far, the Estonians have not dared to apply their new so-called legislation on ships under the Russian flag. Again, we strongly urge the state to strictly follow the norms of international maritime law in order not to become a pirate. We will closely monitor this situation, in particular, the actions of Estonia.